So let's. Okay, my software me says I'm streaming, and I need to mute myself. Okay, welcome everyone. Yeah, that's to my first Ask Me Anything session, and I hope you will bear with me because, yeah, it's my first one, and I've never done something like this, so we will truly experience some strange behaviors. And what you see here is the current questions which have been proposed until today. We have about 18 questions. And to start with the Ask Me Anything question, I want to start with something easy, the MVPs, then have categorized some questions to new to WEBCON BPS. And then the last ones regarding implementation projects and stuff like these. Okay, so let's go to the first question. Yeah, something more or less easy. Any tips for someone that would like to become a WEBCON MVP? I might have to admit, or my suggestion is, if your only goal is to become a WEBCON MVP, that's not enough. Because you need another kind of motivation to persist in this. For me, it's more or less kind of a hobby and I wanted to help out someone in the WEBCON community. And therefore, I started my blog. In the beginning, I've become more visible on LinkedIn and, of course, in the community. And if it wouldn't be my hobby, I wouldn't have lasted so long, right? More or less about 3 years almost. Because most of the time, you don't get any reactions. You don't get any feedback, whether your ideas help someone or not. I mean, if you are thinking about your behavior and you read up in the internet for some questions, then you read the answers and you go on. So don't react with the author of the answer, and you just read it, consume it, and go on. And if you are not capable, and this will also apply to your answers, whatever you are doing. So only having this goal, becoming a WEBCON MVP, will not help you in the long run. You have to do something else to get motivated and stay motivated for this. And yeah, linked here or put a QR code to the WEBCON page, which kind of topics are evaluated for the WEBCON MVP process. And if you're still interested in it, yeah, you can read up on this a little bit more on this page. I hope this answers the question, at least to some degree. And now let's go over to a more or less funny question. How does it feel to be the number one MVP in the WEBCON community? I wouldn't say that I'm the number one MVP. Maybe I'm the most visible MVP in the non-Polish speaking world. I have no idea how it's in Poland, if there's anyone else visible and helping out so much, because I can't read Polish. Don't speak Polish, and therefore I have no idea what's going on there in this world in Poland, the motherland of WEBCON, so to say. So yes, it feels great to be on stage every time, but that's not only for me, it's for every MVP which was nominated and awarded the MVP award. I hope that's not a too elusive answer, and I'm not sure if that was really meant to be serious. Okay, next question. I will just take a look at the chat. Oh, if there, as far as I can tell, there wasn't any questions or information. Yeah, I haven't talked about it, but of course you could write in the chat of the YouTube event, and maybe if you have some questions or want to have more information. Okay, let's go back to the real questions and now to something more WEBCON related. I try to group the same questions or similar questions so that I can answer more while the persons who submitted these questions still find themselves in here. So what was my first experience with WEBCON and what more or less convinced me to go with WEBCON BPS. First of all, I have to tell you that a little bit of my background. I have been a Navision developer, which is currently called Business Central, before I switched to the SharePoint developer, and later on I focused on WEBCON BPS. And like every SharePoint developer, I've come across Nintex and SharePoint workflows, and I really hated them, especially testing and everything. As soon as something failed, you had to restart the workflow and clean up everything, and it cost so much of the time to develop and deploy something that we also create our own deployment packages with PowerShell for this whole stuff. And I guess they'll get some feelings boiled up whenever I think about it. Also wasted time, and therefore the instant change was a really game changer, or was a really great thing which WEBCON did with WEBCON BPS. It saves so much time. I don't know how much time I saved with this, because I can test everything already in this Designer Studio. I can test it in real life, and if there's a problem, I can just change it and use the same test data to go on, and it really makes the life a lot more easily. And besides this, there are all these little details in there. WEBCON BPS, which I thought when I have seen it the first time, if I had done a product, I would have liked the idea, and I would have done it like this if I had thought about it this. For example, redirecting mails during the testing. I sent quite a few mails to some people who should have received a mail when working with SharePoint and Nintex workflows. And this redirect option, would save me a lot of headaches. And coming from my background as a Navision developer, there's a similar concept like business entities in WEBCON BPS. They are called companies, and the companies store their data. Not if you have multiple companies, you store the data. The database structure is that you have one table per each company. So then the company name is inside the table name. So I would have, if I have an environment with 3 business entities or companies in Navision terms, and I have an article table, then I have 2 article tables in there. I have to see where my fingers are, so you can see them. And using the data sources, which can be set up for business entities, and each business entities could read their own table, would have saved me quite a lot of time. And I've put in here an example of my video where I displayed those business entities. It's on YouTube, and you can go over there later on in my channel to watch it if you don't know what I mean. So there's an example with 3 business entities where I receive the customers from 2 different data tables, and for one business entity I receive them via the REST API. So it's really great, and these are just 2 examples of the small details I mentioned. And I learned WEBCON BPS using the info icon, the blue info icon in WEBCON BPS. Let's check it. For example, let's go over just shortly to the Designer Studio to show you what I mean. Here we have the server type, and this little blue info icons helped me a lot learning WEBCON BPS because they are overall, and the help on there has been really great. And that was my experience with WEBCON BPS, and all these small details really helped me to go to the site too. And they have shown that WEBCON cares about everyone involved in the whole process, not only the end users, but also the persons creating everything, creating the processes. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask, but let's be the first. And let's take a look at the chat. Okay. Hi, Arno. I hope you will see each other again on the WebCon day. Let's go on to the next question. Yeah, what are my top 3 features on WebCon? And I talked already about instance change. And what's really was a genius idea, in my opinion, was introducing SQL commands, which helped me a lot. And so maybe thanks to these SQL commands introduction, I was able to complete almost 95 or 95% of all use cases with pure WebCon BPS internal settings without relying on SDKs, without relying on JavaScript or something like this. Because using SQL opens just a great world of options in there that there's just no need for the custom development most of the time. And since I'm the developer, and I'm also supporting the applications I do, I need debugging. I already mentioned that we can test the expressions we define in the Designer Studio already before even deploying them, but even after deploying them to this, saving them and testing it, we have a lot of options for debugging. We have the diagnostic mode in the meantime. I have confused with my fingers because it's switched. My left is on the right and my right is on the left. I need to get used to it and I need to change it afterwards. But let's go back to the debugging, and thanks to the diagnostic mode, I was able to solve a lot of topics I had, especially even if I have a parent workflow which creates a sub workflow which again executes some actions, and these actions are failing. Here it already helped me, and also the history that we have the history for everything available, and that we have a history for not only that we have a history for the normal user as well as for the admin user, which contains even more information. Everything combined did help me a lot because I could get every information, or most of the time every information I need to solve the actual problem. And if you want to have a look what even more, or if you want to have a look at more features I love about WebCon BPS, then you can take a look at my series. I love WebCon BPS. I've written this for LinkedIn, and I posted about 16 parts of posts on LinkedIn about this. I copied them to my to my blog so that they're more visible. Changed them slightly, but they have been intended to be read on LinkedIn, as I am using some carousel posts and the slides that you can click through. Yeah. So there will be some more information, and I have discussed some of our already mentioned one in more detail in there. So before I'm going on, I have to take a look at the chat because there's something there. Yeah, there's a question regarding JavaScript. There was in the chat, and I will come back to it because there's a similar question in here in these slides, but this will come out later when I'm talking about the questions related to the process implementation. Next question in terms of new to WEBCON BPS. And yeah, what would I tell someone who's new to WEBCON, and how would I convince them? Yeah. One thing I haven't mentioned is data integrity. What do I mean with this? If you have an ERP system and you are, for example, have a sales order where you want to send the items to the customer and you want to invoice them, then you have different number of tables involved, where you need to change the data. You need to reduce available quantity of the articles in your database. You need to reduce the number of sent items inside the sales order. You need to do some accounting stuff. And all of this has to work, or it needs to be reverted back. That's in ERP systems, you're using a transaction for this. So either everything works or none works, and everything's back to before you started with this process. And this is part of the data integrity. And in my opinion, you shouldn't expect less from a process platform, especially if you are using these for critical processes. And I didn't encounter another platform where you could use this, where this also adheres to the standard. Let's take SharePoint, for example. In the past, if you're using SharePoint for storing data, we maybe have two lists, libraries, lists. Then I forgot the term in the meantime. And if you're need to write data to both lists, and the writing to the second one fails, the data in the first list still exists. And then you have to clean up. But you have to know that you need to clean up the data. And what happens if you need to clean up the data and this one fails? And I had some little experience with the Power Platform flows, and there was also each action is executed. And if it's executed, it's done. You can't revert it. Let's make another example for sending emails. So you have an action where you need to send an email to the recipient of the tasks, and then something later in the flow, something breaks, and the task is not there or not completely there, and the email has gone out. In WEBCON BPS, you won't have this problem. I hope I've given you an idea what I mean with data integrity and why I'm raising it so far, despite having all these other features and mentions I've already done. It's just something which occurred only to me a few months ago, that this is really a great feature which I'm relying on a lot. And if you really should look out for this. If you're using the platform or your local tool, not only for your single user use case, but for departments, for cross-department workflows, which are relevant to the business and where the data should be correct. Okay, no more new questions in the chat, so let's go on with those questions already submitted to me. Oh, I think I've scrolled down too far. Yeah. And this is one more of a tough question. We already have ERP, we already have CRM, e-commerce, and many other systems. Well, adding more systems, tools will not even be more complicated. Yes, I have to admit, the more tools you have, the more complex it gets. The question is, which of these tools are relevant for your strategic approach? Is it what is a strategic platform, like your EP system, maybe your CM system, e-commerce system? Which of these systems are only for personal use? Could it be that this strategic platform could replace other systems? Maybe, maybe not. And while this is or more abstract, and you could apply this to any platform you are introducing into your company. The question is regarding WEBCON BPS, who switches for processes. How many processes do you have which are using data from different systems? And how are you currently handling these processes? Are these processes only virtual existent? Because the people know how to work with each other, because the people are sending emails forward and back? Or do you already have some processes in place which structure these processes? And something else I want to add here with WEBCON BPS, the cost increases with the users, not with the number of applications or processes you are running. So if you can replace them, other applications, it won't cost you more, just because you add new applications to WEBCON. And these are all questions related to, new to WEBCON BPS, at least, which have been submitted. And I hope the person who submitted this question has an idea what I mean with this, because it's abstract, it's complicated, the complexity increases for sure, and it really depends on your use case. So let's go on with the process implementation as there are no further questions. One moment. Yeah. So there are some questions regarding what I've done and what was the most challenging configuration, what was the most difficult one. I have to admit that difficulty depends on your experience and on your viewpoint, because I see my daughter is in the 2nd grade of school and she's just learning to add and subtract numbers, and seeing this, it's hard to imagine how it was in the beginning if you don't know it. With your experience, it's so easy to do. So let's start with these two, or let's just name the. But even so, stating these, I have two processes which I want to talk about a bit, which fall into this category. For one customer, we created a risk management. Sounds easy at first, but the customer has a number of just projects, and for all these projects, they have questions, and they want to fill out a questionnaire so that they all have they can answer each, or that they have a process and structure for the answering also to filling out the questionnaire, which then produces repeatable results for each new project. The questions for the questionnaires can be defined. And their answers can be defined. For these answers, they can create or define that tasks need to be created. And again, and besides these tasks, these answers can have a risk assigned. For example, if you have a penalty for a project, if you don't deliver it of 15%, it could be a high risk. And if there's no penalty involved, it could be no risk would be created. Configuring all these questions is one part. The second part is that all these questions can be grouped into a questionnaire depending on a few choice fields of a few metadata. so that you have multiple questionnaires consisting of these questions, which will, and if you create a new project, these questions will then be, or these questionnaires will be looked up, and all these match on based on the submit entered data. And when you start the process, the questionnaire will be created based on the questions from the past you configured. Then all the people are answering the questions. And when they are finished answering the questions, we are creating the risk management. The risk management is created based on, then looks, the risk management is a workflow, which then looks into the item list, the table containing the questions and answers, which answers has been applied, is a task for this answer defined, then without a risk, then adds this task directly to the risk management. If the answer has a risk, then create a risk sub-workflow. And this one, and then if there's also a task should be created, then create a task for this risk. So I'm creating the risk management. It's a parent workflow, which can have tasks, which can have risk. And these risks can also have tasks. And if you are thinking back to what I said about data integrity and errors and failures, which can go wrong, it's highly important that everything of this works or it doesn't work. I've a few cases where it didn't work, but I was able to solve every problem in this related to this. And that's just some point of why data integrity is so important. Let's take me a look for the chat for the moment. Okay, we'll answer these questions later. Let's go on for the different, for my second answer, the cross-department routing slip process, which we have in here. As I mentioned before, we have regarding the complexity question, I've mentioned already cross-department. Here we have a process which is defined, which defines steps, or you can think of a paper with different steps, and each of these steps need to be filled out by different departments. And if you have a paper, you pass the paper to one department, it passes it to the next department, and so go on. And at the end, it's filled out and everything is fine. In this situation, this paper and the steps on it are related to a customer, and they are different for each customer. And it on these steps states what should be done by which department when they receive the order from the customer. This doesn't sound so complicated, or this customers, the steps are then created for each, these papers are then created for each sales order of the customer, and they are executed by the persons. If you now think back, for example, what you're doing with a paper, the problem in here was paper is flexible. You can write on it. You can do anything with it. You can send it back if something goes wrong and so on. And in here, we had to ensure that we are delivering a similar experience, which was challenging. As you're going from paper to digital, because you're using some kind of flexibility, because you are going to structure it, it makes it more hard. But I think I will come back to this later. There's a little example from this where we have done this with, we're going back to it. Let's stop it at this point, and then we will see why I've mentioned it, because it was challenging. Or another example where it was more challenging. Yeah. And regarding JavaScript and so on, the question raised in the chat, Here was a question about whether a non-programming or with a person without programming skills can use to build medium or complex applications with WEBCON. I would say definitely say yes, because I myself using 95% of all the time I'm working with WEBCON BPS, the default mechanisms of WEBCON, and combining these with SQL commands. SQL commands are, it's not something complex. You have to have an analytical mind. You may want to take a look at the database and see how everything is working together with each other. But in the end, if you can use Excel for doing some complex formulas, then you will be able to use WEBCON to even build complex applications with a little bit of experience, training on the academy or a partner or whoever or whoever you want to have as a trainer. But just start small and then do something more complex. And then you will be fine. Because WEBCON is also evolving the way you as a designer are creating the workflows. If you take a look at my blog, I've written an expert series in 21. And in the meantime, so much has changed to the better in WEBCON BPS. I would need to redo my whole post just to be up on the current and make use of all the new stuff, which makes it really more easy. Yeah. That being said, you may know me for JavaScript and CSS stuff on my blog post. But all in all, this is really just a small part of the time I'm spending with WEBCON. Because when I'm creating something with JavaScript, I make sure that I can reuse it and others can reuse it. Then I can share it on my blog. And then you don't need to think about it. If you have a partner or someone else who's capable of doing this stuff, you need just to have some idea on how to do it or do some HTML development, and maybe even ChatGPT, GPT, and others like these can help you create the JavaScript or CSS you need. But as mentioned here, most of the time I don't need it, or I reuse ready-made form JavaScript, which is used as form rules. And SDKs, C# SDKs for creating plugins in WEBCON BPS, these I create even less. So it's really, if you have a programming background, it will be easy or easier to dive into WEBCON. If you have no programming background and skills, but have an analytical mind and try to understand how everything works out and plays together, you will be just fine. And then let's take a look. And Martin answered. Let's go back to Martin's answer from the chat. Question from the chat regarding JavaScript. Actually, I don't often face problems with JavaScript. The bigger problem I had with JavaScript, or when I was upgrading from 22 to 23 and relying on internal variables, which have been removed. This caused me a lot of problems. But in the end, if they are running, they are running. And maybe it's just some of my experience as a SharePoint developer that I haven't encountered much of an issues in here. Sure, there are some things I would like to improve or would make something easier, but maybe you can state a problem, but I and my other colleagues don't really have problems with JavaScript once we've made it work. But I have to admit that some of my posts on my blog, like this Let's take a look at my blog, and instead of talking about it, didn't want to go here, but here. Categories, tags, JavaScript, complete fields with. Here I have something done which with JavaScript, where when you submit a workflow, then you go and you receive a list of errors that you can tab through all these fields, and only using tabs that you easily can fill out the remaining information and don't need to go to each tab where there's a field which has caused the error. You can just go through this, and also the one with missing comment. Here's a comment in this path required a comment, and here I finally found a solution to enter the comment inside the error dialog box, and it cost me a lot of time to find a solution because I'm not knowledgeable about React and how we can simulate some things. But in the end, now it's working, and it's just working fine and running everywhere. So let's switch back to the slides and let me take a look at it. I hope, Martin, that this answered your question. And there are some others. Let's go back to the question from Tobias because it's looking like he's new to WEBCON BPS. Before I'm continuing, regarding IT security and connectors, I can just show something to you. Designer Studio. Here we see, I hope you see it good enough and that the resolution is well enough that you see something. Here we have our data sources in WEBCON BPS. And you see something which is called association and security. In WEBCON BPS, we can define applications and assign a data source to a number of applications which can use these data sources. And we can also define who's the owner of these data sources. So we can allow and define who is able to use a data source in which applications, because we can also restrict which applications can be developed by whom. For these, there's user privileges like business administrator who can do everything and develop these applications, the processes contained in it. So we have an option for defining who can do what with which data source. And in terms of citizen developers, WEBCON itself isn't using the term citizen developer because you really need to have a training with WEBCON at the end. You just can't go on and put it out to everyone, especially because, one part is even if you have a number of colleagues which could use or can use WEBCON, you need to have a license. That's also fine. And for everything else, you also need licenses. But you are really here where you need to have some training because, as you see, we don't have a browser interface for this. We have a Windows Forms applications for creating applications and so on. And the reason for this is, and I doubt that it will ever be moved to a browser, is because you have such a tremendous amount of options in here that it will be hard to deliver the same experience in here. And here, like in the browser. And coming back to it here, this is also ensures some kind of center of excellence, which you have in other types, which you are also using in other low-code environment like Power Platform. And instead of, let's say, users do the actual implementation, there's the designer desk, which can be used more in a low-code manner, like that's currently in the public opinion how low-code should be used, because I there can just move, drag and drop as a process steps and define how it works, how the form field should be looking like. And maybe I can just show you something in here. What can be used for collaboration with departments? No, I stripped it. I don't want to. I would like to answer this in more detail, but I think it's the designer desk would be worth a known question and some more time to really, at least 50 minutes to go through everything you can do. Just to describe it in a few minutes, the designer desk, you can define a workflow, you can define fields, when the field should be displayed in which step of the workflow, and you can go through the step and you can provide documentation what should happen when. And when you finish describing testing the workflow, you can actually test it. Start with step 1, send it to the next step, check everything if every data is there, if every form is there, if every field is there, and create some tests, do some tests, information and data, save them. Then you can also create reports and dashboards using this test data. And if you're fine with this application, then you can submit it, publish it to the IT department or to the Center of Excellence for WEBCON BPS, who will then implement the magic stuff like fetching data from the ERP system and from the CRM system. Let the IT stuff and governance be in place so that everything is handled from the guys who are responsible for it. And let the department do the building of the processes. This will really, that's the citizen-assisted development approach. And you can really read up more on this on the WEBCON page, and there are videos for this. I hope I answered these questions regarding the connector security and IT security. So we still have an answer in the chat from Arno, which I will also answer right now, because I myself haven't run into any hard limits. But yeah, no, not much, but let me just go to my browser, to my blog post. And regarding numbers, in Numbers I Trust, this was my last blog post. Let's say there have been customers creating 2.5 million invoices per month, 1 million tasks per month, a 7 terabyte of database size. There was a question in the community or user invoice. Then an improvement could be made so that the archiving of 200,000 instances from the content database to the archive database was done in 16 hours. It was taking longer before this little tweak has been made, but this gets you an idea regarding numbers. And I have to admit, at Cosmo, the Cosmo Life Science was created in 2019. It took some time to get customers in the regulated industry, and we just didn't have the time to run into numbers issues. And there's a question from Carlos from Mexico. This is just a short one. And the last one on the chat currently at the moment, so I will answer this one, which I haven't answered. Like with every low-code tool, there's no real branching. We don't have really a repository for source code because we don't have source code. Everything, the whole process in WEBCON BPS, the whole process definition, the application is all stored inside the database along with the workflow instances. So if you have the content database and make a backup, you have everything in place. And we sort on our system. What I did in the past was to have a look at the export package. When I'm exporting, if you are transporting a workflow version, application version from the development environment to the test environment, you're creating an export package. And I had a look at this export package because we also would like to have some kind of repositories to have a look at it, how it was in the past. I've seen into it, and that's stored in XML. That's fine. I've also had a look at the Nintex workflows. They are also stored in XML. It's not nice to look at them, but you could make sense of them. In the end, I dropped this approach, and because when we've updated it to a new WEBCON BPS version, the export file definition was changed and they weren't comparable. So I just thought, okay, let's ignore it for now. We won't be able to do something like branching or something like this. And it's also not really an option in WEBCON because the data integrity I mentioned before also applies to the WEBCON artifacts. If you have a step in a process and want to delete it, maybe I have something in here. Oh, I've just, and you have used this step. There's an old process which is not working, and there's an old version where the workflow preview isn't always up to date. Let me check it. Designer Studio. Here we have a workflow with different steps. And if you have workflow instances using this workflow and using the step, for example, verify workflows, and I would like to delete it, WEBCON checks checks one for one thing whether a step is used. And okay, in this case, I haven't used the workflow yet. Would I have used the workflow, I would have gotten an error because the step has been used, and for data integrity and audit and traceability, we need to have the step in place so that we can display it in the history. Now you could come up with something like if you're going into the situation that you have a development database and a test database, and you are cleaning up the development database and also the processes and delete everything, then you could delete a step in the development database. Deploying then this new version to the target database, to the test database, would in theory cause you to, if you have to break this data integrity because it would remove the step. Or you could, during the upgrade process. This won't happen in WEBCON BPS. step will still be there because WEBCON will prevent you from deleting the step. So maybe it may not be used because their paths are leading from here to here, and this wouldn't be used, but you will still keep your data. And if you take a look at other local platforms, coming back to the branching and source control topics, most of the time these don't have it either, because everything is stored neatly inside and you don't really see a look at the code. At least if you're referring to low-code tools which are not generating code. There are also low-code platforms which are generating code, but we are talking here about a process platform in WEBCON BPS with all kind of informations. Not only the logic, the form field definition, the data, the reports definition, securities information, which are also transport or can be transported to the target databases. I hope, Carlos, that you could get an idea that could have an idea how why it doesn't work in WEBCON BPS with a source control, at least at this point in time. Maybe in the future, but that's something I don't know. And one addition into one comment regarding this, which makes it quite hard for partners. WEBCON BPS is focusing on end customers, and they are upgrading from one version to another. And there's always an upgrade path. You can always upgrade transport. You can upgrade path in terms of installing a new version. That's fine for an end user because you have at your development system, which may have should have a newer version, or at least not a later version than your test and production environment. And then you can apply the new version of WEBCON BPS to the other environments, and then you can just transport the process just fine because you are on the same level. You can't transport processes definitions to older versions. These will break. And this makes it quite hard for partners who are developing some templates and stuff or products even on WEBCON BPS, which should be used by multiple customers. And so we are always on the latest version and need to apply fixes then to the customers. And if you apply fixes to the customers, since we don't have actually code, this will cause deviations, which will be in the derivations, the customizations will be overwritten if we at any point in time transport a process from our development to their customized development and process. The changes will be just overwritten. If it's possible, because of data integrity issues, of course. I hope this answered your questions and maybe even more, Carlos. If you have some more, want to have some more information, you can just come back to me. As I'm not available all, even also, of course, afterwards too. But now let's go back to the PowerPoint and to the next question. Okay, yeah, I deviated from this, but yeah, it's live, and so let's hope I didn't lost you. So we had the standard and SQL and JavaScript stuff. Yeah. And some challenges I've been proud of is this one, which I wanted to show you, which is also related to the to the routing slip I mentioned. Let's go back a bit. Here we have the so-called steps I mentioned, which are the quality plan instance. Here is a routing slip itself. Here we have the steps, the quality plan instance steps the paper with all these steps which need to be covered by all the departments. And at some point in time in here, there's some quality step involved in here, and maybe the quality assurance did notice that there's something wrong and we need to repeat steps. So we see here the steps which should be on each routing slip, on each paper. They can define which steps should be repeated again, which they could be copied. And here we see what will happen. That we, in the first part of this, the quality guy selected the steps which should be repeated. Here we see what will happen. Here we see that nothing will change with the steps above, then the other ones will be created. And at the end, the other existing ones will be renumbered. And this now updates all the stuff, and now we have here even more steps in here which have been previously completed, as I have been, well, I'm not sure what I did with this test, but maybe you have these ones and these ones has been added in between. And this was done without an SDK, without JavaScript. This was done with pure WEBCON BPS and some SQL statements. The same applies to a decision tree, which I've done in the past. What I mean with the decision tree, we have here for one customer this little flowchart where we need to answer some questions. And at the end, depending on which path you should use, this one or this one, we have either the outcome mandatory declaration, voluntary declaration, no declaration. And yeah, the customer wanted to have this in a configurable way. And that's my solution in here. Here we have the question, you select an answer, and the next question gets populated. And at the end, we have the outcome. And here, in this example, I'm choosing a different path, and there's another outcome. And depending on the question, we have different questions will be displayed and yeah, different outcomes. Yeah, and this was also done without JavaScript or an SDK. So these are some things I'm proud of because I've come up with some ideas how we can utilize WEBCON BPS in standard. On the other hand, I've made these questionnaires to risk management is also something, yeah, which I'm glad I've been able to come up with, that I make it work. And let's go to the next question. What are the most challenging SDKs you had to create? Yeah, even so, I don't create SDKs much. A lot of my time when I work with WEBCON, there was two. Or one thing is, yeah, so-called forced authentication with Azure AD or the Active Directory. You may know that, or may read about it in WEBCON BPS 23 R3. We have the path authorization with where you can define that a path requires authentication, either via email or the new mobile application, and so that you have more or less of a two-factor authentication. One for logging into your computer, where you might get signed in automatically, but you have still to provide an authentication either via mail, SMS, or the mobile application. Saying this, in the past we've created something similar, but And since we don't have a mobile applications, we decided to implement a field where the user has to enter his Active Directory information, which then gets validated. For the Active Directory, we need to have the password, and we made sure that the password is never written to the history. And also we have done the same for the Active Directory. Which was a little bit hard because I've had only a few experience with it, and we need to have a way to, let's say, logged in user who's logged in with his Azure Active Directory account was forced to log in again when he clicked on it, when he wanted to accept something similar to the pass authorization. So this is something I've been proud of. And it was challenging because it was my first time playing with fields and WebCon SDKs for fields and React and the Azure AD authentication stuff. And other challenging SDKs are if you need to directly work with WebCon, like with working with document attachments and manipulating them, because you can't test them. With everything else, there's an option to test them without actually using the process of WebCon, using the without deploying this SDK to the WebCon server and start a process and activate the debugger so that you can debug the process and see what's happening in there. You can all do it on your system and with some way or another. But if you're working with documents or fetching data from somewhere else, this is not so easy. Because of these restrictions, I haven't found a way yet to mock the WebCon object model so that I could test it locally on my computer. So let's see, let's have a short look at the chat. There's some question regarding Power Platform. What would it look like? Yeah, Power Platform moving away, and what would it look like to have a large platform and application in WebCon? I will just answer it now because the other questions aren't related to this. I'm not sure since when you are in this Ask Me Anything session event, but there was a question regarding numbers. Maybe I can just bring it up again, just for information. Browser. WEBCON BPS, as you can see from these numbers, WEBCON BPS supports not only small number of workflows, but really large number of workflows. Of course, you need to have some server for this, or more of a server farm or so that you are 2 servers or 3 servers depending on the number of users. And developing, and could be one thing in terms of large application. I'm not sure what kind of applications you are thinking of, but what I or whether it's a large user base, which is also not a problem in here. Let me because WebCon itself recommends as also a recommendation for setting up an infrastructure for over 10,000 of users. And regarding, these are 2 options which could be large, and another term probably is a lot of artifacts of which the application consists. I'm not sure how I should answer to this, because let me see. Here we have some my playground. I'm just looking. I don't have an option to show something of an application which I talked about, because these are custom applications. And now I'm having something to show. Maybe you could come back to me, Philip, could speak it in more detail what you kind of applications you want to replace. And basically what it looks like in general. Let's just ignore whether it's a large or a small application. Let me take a look move to the Designer Studio. Here we have a so-called application group in here, and it's the number of applications. In these applications, you can have different processes. Let's ignore that it's German for. I'm sorry for being this in German, because that's something I've done for myself. That's the so-called, Here we have one process, we have another process, which are interacting with each other. Each process has their fields and informations and individual workflows and more, and the application itself has some UI elements in here. And these, I need to check it, but yeah, maybe I don't see something here. If you're creating this application with all these artifacts, then you have an option to also define data connections to other systems or process constants in here. And if you're an end customer, that's really fine, because you can, for one part, have so-called constants which have different values for the environments, which can either be shared, or different information for the development, test, and production environment. And these information can also be defined in here, and these are also available on the REST web service. Here we have development, test, and production, how the web service should connect to them. And you can define all of this information, everything related to this application, inside the development environment, and then you're going to export it. Where you can see afterward, where the system checks which kind of relations are there in the current application. And you see in here that's the application itself. I was in this application, I wanted to export it. Now the system found that these other applications are related to it, because there's something is used in there. And you get one export package with a whole configuration, and even these are some setup information, master data, where I can export the data from into the package also, and then I can import it to another environment, and the whole application will be updated, and I can define whether the configuration data should be imported too. So in terms of deploying applications, or transporting applications, this you have one whole product or one whole file which you can then deploy it. There's no need for having multiple ways to check and enter the data. I hope you have a little idea what's possible, because I'm not sure how better I could explain it in these few minutes, the question regarding the large solutions or large applications. And if you need to have the C# SDK plugin, or you can if WEBCON doesn't fulfill your requirements out of the box and you need to have an SDK, then you can create these SDKs, and these SDKs will also be part of this package. So really everything you need for running this application is contained in a single file, which you can take and deploy. And be happy at least after assigning the securities. But once you've done it and you just do the updates, everything is running smoothly. I hope this helped you. And if not, just come back to me. I will be available. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and to the next question. Yeah, where do you get inspiration from to get creative with applications? Questions. Basically, these are questions and other things which annoy me or could be made better. Questions which I read in the community which spike my interest from customers, from colleagues. And I think these inspirations, creativity is related to the JavaScript stuff I'm doing. And you can see I've made a little post in here in the have taken a little picture from my blog, and most of my blog posts are related to these creative solutions because these are not standard, and for the other standard stuff or a lot of things on this you've had a lot of information on the community anyway, so I'm focusing on other information or often used questions. I'm not sure whether the person who submitted this question is still on the chat. It's quite already going on an hour. I wasn't expecting this, but it's fine for me. And I hope you aren't, if you're still here, then you're hopefully liking it. But yeah, my inspiration is, I need to get me a question, I will find a solution. I once compared myself to let's just say, I will say it anyway. I compared myself to a dog, and the person who's asking this question is throwing a stick, and I'm running after it and coming back with a solution, regardless of what kind of question it is, especially if it's related to technical stuff. And yeah, most of the time, at least most of the time, I come back with a stick. So let's go further. This question was submitted yesterday. Are there already applications, or are we using Hotmailboxes? And how with the configuration of imports and of the organizational imports and the organizational fields we manage within the process? I'm not sure that I understand the whole question. Hotmailbox, I have to say, I've used them in the past once, but we are currently not using them. There's just no need for them at the moment. And regarding the implementation or fields, I'm not sure whether you mean fields from the mail or if you are sending an email from an existing process out to someone else and where you want to get back some information. Could also be the case. Regarding the information from the fields, there's the documentation. Here we have the, do you see this? Yeah, it should be visible. Or not, no, that's not visible. Oh, never mind. Here we have this is a link to the Hotmailbox configuration and additional fields. You can, that's unfortunately not visible here. You have these variables which can be used to fill fields in the process or using these variables, this content from the mail. And maybe I can show it to you on the system directly where it's added. Let's go to the Designer Studio. Here we have the start workflow settings. Let me just pick something. And then we can set field values, where you can just select the fields of the process I've got just selected. And here in the value, we can set either a fixed value, or I can use one of the variables, like sender domain. If you now have something, if you now want to extract other information, I don't see much of an option, at least with this. The only idea I have in mind is, even though it's fragile because it's an email, you never know what will happen to the email content. Will it be part of the email? Will it be removed or whatever happens? But if you can make somehow sure that you receive the information the correct way, you could use the body content on the content. I'm not sure which one uses XML, which will store the XML inside a field and then use XPath expressions to work with the XML. So you could, when the SQL, and with XPath, I mean an SQL command which uses XPath to extract data from the XML element from the HTML. And that's something in here which goes back to the starting point for when I mentioned that I really like the SQL implementation. I think it's genius. Because here you could actually go to Stack Overflow or go to ChatGPT, put in the HTML, and probably get some SQL command back to extract some data from the HTML. And at least if you have really data inside the email body, which you need to save into another field. For this, while you are saving these information here in the Designer Studio, in some fields in the first step, the second step would be processing the content which is stored in a field and extracting the information and writing it back to another field so that you can continue. And I'm not sure. Another part of this question could also be if you are, no, I've just too many assumptions. I hope the person who submitted this question is either still in the chat or will look after it, and if I didn't answer it correctly, or you can get in contact with me either through LinkedIn, through my blog as a comment, or write it on the community, the question itself. So that was one more question. Do you use any create articles? Yes, we are using a little bit wiki at least for our developer guys who are creating the processes. We are using the DevOps wiki for this. No, stop here. That's at least, yeah, okay. In terms of for the developing, we are using this wiki, but I haven't read the question to the end. Or maybe it depends on what kind of problems you mean, Damian, because problems related to, for example, advanced sub-workflow settings, how you can configure these so that the sub-workflow, that the parent process of the parent process goes on only in specific cases. I've put in there an SQL command so that you can easily reuse it. But on the other hand, there's also the option that the end users come up with problems and may encounter errors like workflow instance has been checked out by user. Oh, there's an error. I don't know what to do. And this can also happen and can help. And maybe there are also sometimes always the same questions in a workflow step, specific workflow step. What can I do? I don't know. I've forgotten it. At this point, we are currently thinking about writing some kind of documentation which is linked to the step which can then the user can then open. And yes, you could also put in an HTML field, for example, in the specific process, which is linked, which contains a link to the wiki for the step, and display this field only on the step of the process. And then you have some kind of link. Maybe you can make it display it as a question mark instead of a link, so it's a little bit easier and nice to look at. Then your users could have click on it. The link of the wiki would open, the wiki would be displayed, they can read up on it. This is just an idea I've come to my mind right now. I hope this helps you, Damien. Let's go back to the next question. Oh, yeah, the most, and we have almost through. What's the most surprising, unexpected, weird process you have ever built in WEBCON? That was one of my first ones. Why I'm getting disconnected, reconnecting. I hope I'm still there. Okay, reconnection successful. So let's continue. One of my first processes was for submitting improvement ideas, which is fine in itself, which is then the ideas would then be processed by some group, and at the same time, while this process is there and undergoing a review, the same idea should be visible for the public, but it shouldn't be visible by whom it was submitted. So in the end, I created two processes. One was the actual process and one was a shadow process. It's mirrored, it's strange, I had to fix this. And the shadow workflow was had the same steps, had the same paths, and the parent process was triggered whenever the parent process was updated and moved to another step. The sub shadow workflow was also updated, and so the data was replicated, and they were the same step. We needed this shadow and a news workflow to have some more information and give feedback by the other users. For this is what the shadow workflow was used. And this was also one of the first tickets I submitted, because creating this sub workflow required that I choose a different author for the workflow, and this wasn't working. There was an error in it. That was one of my first tickets I've ever submitted to WEBCON. Yeah, what was an application which I would like to implement in WEBCON, but there wasn't yet a time for opportunity to do so. We are hosting for our customers some WEBCON servers on our Cosmo Cloud, and they are secured with the RDP access to these servers is limited to some IPs, for which I need to connect to the VPN to the office so that I can access the VMs. And I would like some application where I am making this even more secure. I would select a server to which I want to connect. Then the customer maybe gets an information who needs it to approve it, that I will be granted the access, so that he's aware of it, that I connected to it. Then the process uses some APIs from Azure to set up the rules so that I can connect with my current IP address to the server, and the workflow will make sure at the end that the access is removed after a defined time with the customer, 2 hours, 3 hours. Even so, if I don't forget to remove it myself, the process itself will just lock me out. That's something I have in mind since a few years, but there was just no opportunity to do. Yeah, last two questions in here. Yeah, what are top 3 things what I would like to see WEBCON implement in the future? Improved import and export of applications, command line support, and some kind of command line support, because this is currently done using the Designer Studio, the Windows application. And as you have seen or know, you may know, that you can select what kind of information want to have exported and what should be imported and how like that. And want to create export it. I would like to have an option to standardize how each process should be exported and with which settings they should be imported, so it can be more structured. There's less errors for import-export problems. And then we have some issues with partners, which are mostly related for partners because we have quite a lot of times a test environment on the customer side and a production environment, but no development environment. So we have sometimes on our environment multiple customers, solutions which are then going to be exported from our system and imported to their system. And as the business entities are part of the process, as exported applications, the application groups are part of it, and everything like some information like this are part of the export package. We always need to do some manual stuff to remove these unimportant information from the customer environment or some other environment or some other databases. In some cases, we have multiple databases, which is the same process, the same applications. Sometimes for recovery reasons that the database doesn't grow too big and takes a long time for recovering. There's some thoughts we have made, or decision we have made. And having this, then this you don't necessarily have this if you are an end user and end customer who's just transporting from one environment to another and everything is fine. But having maybe a application supervisor who's called Daniel Kruger in your environment, in our development environment, and we are transporting it to another customer who doesn't have a Daniel Kruger, and you forget to remove this, it can cause some questions. So that's something I really like to have, but I'm not sure whether it ever will be the case. And something I and others would really like to have is some kind of thing like a global JS, like the global CSS. Since, as you may know, we can add CSS, JavaScript to dashboards and forms very easily, but on the other parts of WEBCON, we don't have it. On the starting landing page, on the reports, we don't have it. And this, I've found a workaround. Or well, as we have found 2 workarounds for this. None of these we really like. And another feature which would really save me a lot of time is translations, which are used in data tables rows. As you may, let me go to the Designer Studio. I hope I have it somewhere here. An example in the form fields. Do I have here a data table? Data table. Here I'm using a BPS internal view with some fields. And if you're working in multiple languages, you've translated these fields already in the process so that the user gets English, German, Polish, or whatever translation you provided in the form field. If you are using a BPS internal view and are using the same fields, you need to do the translations here again. It would be really great if these translations would automatically be used. That's something easily forgotten, and yeah, it would help us save a lot of time. Let's go back to a new question in the chat. Some of the best practices when I'm creating a process. I think I'm currently planning to create something like this for creating sub workflows for a blog post. And maybe I need to think about it. That's something I can't do just right now because I have to think about everything. And maybe what I'm currently doing every time for example, when I'm creating a dictionary is, let me check where I have one. So whenever I have a dictionary, I rename the standard fields to system field name and I'm disconnected again, reconnecting. Okay, reconnection is done. I hope you can hear me just fine. Best practice regarding dictionary, we are using a global title field. The, the advantage of a global title field is that we see it everywhere, that we also can see it in the archive. What I mean with archive is the searching structures archive where we would see every instance. And here at the far right, you see the title. And this, we see it because it's a global field. This makes it really easy. And going back to the dictionary, I have no idea why the WEBCON decided to put in their description field, which is only of type single line of text. It doesn't make sense. We can't remove it, so I rename it every time to system field and put in there my own description and title field. In addition, whenever I'm going into a dictionary, it's likely that I want to edit it by default and not switch back to go there into view mode and then to edit mode. That's just some and that will be part of the blog post. I even create for each dictionary a BPS internal view. Not because of some filtering, but because setting up I just make a new form field of type picker, choice field, data source. If I use a dictionary, not drop down, when I need is pop-up search. I can select the data, and in the picker field, I have some kind of additional link in here. But if I'm using the BPS internal view, I also have the option to show link to selected workflow instance. This means that I can click, that I will have a clickable link in there and go to somewhere else. It can show me the dictionary entry inside the preview, for example. But this will be part of my blog post. This is just something I'd like to do, and maybe you can use this as a little outlook, as a best practice I'm using in regards to dictionaries. I hope it's helped you, Damian, for this small time I got this TED. And final question, and let me go back to the PowerPoint here. Well, this one was submitted just before the Ask Me Anything event. How to extend the data reporting using JavaScript charts with interactive actions into WEBCON instances. I have actually didn't understand the question. I'm guessing that this is related to reports, to display report data, maybe as a chart on a dashboard, and then you can go from the chart into the WEBCON instances. Click on it and go to the WEBCON instances. But whoever submitted this please come back to me with some more details, because I really don't understand it. Because, for example, if I have a chart aggregates data most of the time. So maybe you have columns, bars, or a donut chart, and a bar consists of 4 or 5 WEBCON instances. So I'm not sure how you would like to have actions or go want to click on this column, whatever, and go to 5 WEBCON instances. If you're on the other hand wanting to display charts inside a form and using data there, that's really possible. I've done something similar, and maybe I can navigate to my YouTube channel. Let me search for it where's my radar chart, which I've done in the just for a few days ago or a few weeks ago. Here we have an audit, a form, and a radar chart in here, which is using data from the actual audit. And here I selected another audit where we can see in the yellow bars or lines how is the current audit compared to another audit. Of course, it requires that they have the same structure, the same audit, and otherwise it wouldn't be comparable. I've used here for chartjs.org for implementing the chart, and it's a really nice library, which is free. So, and yeah, I didn't expect to last this long, but thanks to your questions, it took longer than expected, and I hope you had some fun, gained some insights, and yeah, curiosity to continue with your WEBCON BPS processes and implementation. And I hope you like this here, and I will probably be back with this another Ask Me Anything session. At least that's an idea. You could leave some feedback if you would like to have another session. Okay, thank you very much for your time, and have a nice evening. Bye.